This is a Wild Games Production podcast.
Welcome to the D&D world.
Meet you by the art room door, in a circle on the hallway floor. I made up a new map last night. It's got a dragon and a wizard fight.
I'm up to 55 different rooms. That just seems like way too much work that I don't want to do. And I'm trying to like make this a way for me to be lazy. So I think I'm just going to use random encounter tables.
You're going to fill your mega dungeon with random encounter tables, or you're going to use random encounter tables to fill your mega dungeon on the fly?
I'm going to use random encounter tables to fill my mega dungeon on the fly. I've also thought about using like the tables from the 1EDMG for like random furnishings and stuff.
But at that point, it is just a big graph map, right?
Yeah, that's all it is. I have like ideas for like, here's where this specific trap is, or here's where like this other specific trap is. But like, that's the most amount of planning I've done for it. But this is still not the Mega Dungeon episode. This is the Save or Die podcast, the podcast about classic Dungeons and Dragons. I am one of your hosts, Crispy.
And I'm one of your hosts, Carl.
And I'm one of your hosts, Courtney.
And we have a special guest today. Our special guest today is kind of like I get the impression that he takes it with a grain of salt, but I think a pretty big deal in the OSR. We have Swords and Wizardry author, creator, Matt Finch with us.
Hey, everybody.
For the first time, right? Is this the first time you've been on Save or Die?
This is indeed the first time I've been on it, and, which you should know because I had to ask for the technical details on how to get connected to the call.
Well, I mean, it was different with previous hosts.
In like 10 years, we haven't had you on the show once.
Not once.
Oh, man. Sorry. Everyone else dropped the ball, but we're here to rectify that.
Obviously waiting on the coolest host.
Probably. We were waiting for Courtney.
I was clumping all three of us in together. I wasn't trying to single myself out, but sure, if you want to.
I thought you said host singular. It's like, yeah, Courtney's probably the coolest out of all three of us. And today we've got Matt on the show to talk about the upcoming Swords and Wizardry Complete box set Kickstarter that is running right now. That has already been funded. You guys are at $52,000 right now.
Yeah, the first day of it was a wild ride. I mean, we were expecting that the entire Kickstarter would bring in about $40,000, and before we were done with the first 24 hours, we hit that mark. So, well, in the first 24 hours, we actually hit 50,000. So it slowed down. It slowed down now at last.
Did it launch yesterday or the day before?
Yesterday.
Yesterday. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Noon
34
yesterday.
Days to go. It's so funny, talking about previous hosts, not to name drop, I guess, but the way I've been getting to the Kickstarter to check it out is by going to Liz's page on Facebook. Because I'll Google Frog God Games Kickstarter, Swords and Wizardry Kickstarter, Matt Finch Kickstarter, and it never comes up. But so I just go directly to Liz's page because I saw her post about it, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's the easiest way for me to do it, I guess.
It's more embarrassing that I have to use my own Facebook timeline to get to it.
Well, I mean, previous hosts, again, I usually find it through Tinkar's posts. So, yeah.
We're one big happy OSR family.
Absolutely.
Matt, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Kickstarter?
Well, yeah, or we could talk about Swords and Wizardry first, depending on whether people are familiar with that in the first place. Either way.
I would love to talk about Swords and Wizardry. I don't know if you remember this, but the first time we reviewed Swords and Wizardry on the show, way back in 2010 or 2011.
For which you didn't invite me.
I know. Look, other people were running the show at that point. You know,
He's gonna keep dropping that throughout the whole show.
Yeah, you gave me something to cling on to with that.
oh, it only took you 10 years. But I was the one leading the charge on that show, and I was like such a fanboy. Like, I remember like it was at Neon Con is when I first got a copy of Swords and Wizardry. I believe, I don't remember her name. I had her card for the longest time, but I believe she was the head of publishing or the head of marketing.
Rachel Ventura, probably.
It might have been.
She's running for Congress now.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. But yeah, she had sold me a book of the first printing of the complete book. And I've read it and I was like, this is great. This is awesome. And there's still things that I really love about it. But let's go ahead and if you want to give us an elevator pitch on what Swords and Wizardry, do you want to stick specifically to complete since that's what the Kickstarter is about, or do you want to talk about like the whole Swords and Wizardry line?
We can talk about the whole Swords and Wizardry line because really it confuses a lot of people. But there's the white box. Well, actually, in chronology, there's Swords and Wizardry core, which is the snapshot of what I was playing at that time, which was the original 3 books from the box set plus the Greyhawk supplement. Because that one was sort of a watershed. It was when the different die types, other than just the D20 and the D6, started showing up in for example, the hit dice for the character classes, and they went to an 8-sided die for hit dice on monsters, and the spread of numbers, to my mind, got a lot easier with that one, just from the DM's perspective. And so that was the first one that came out. And then I got a lot of requests to do the white box, and that one was a cooperative venture with Marv, and he sort of took the core book and worked in white box because I've never really been a white box player, and usually with these different they're not so much editions really, but the various divisions of the rules, somebody who actually plays it is going to do a lot better job of capturing it than somebody who just worked with the framework of it. And so Marv Bragg did the white box version, and so white box is just the first 3 books that were in the set without any of the supplements, and then last of all came complete, which is it's the 3 books that are in the set plus the 4 supplements that came out after that, plus articles from the Strategic Review and from the early issues of the Dragon magazine that contained things like the Ranger. That all worked in so that it was a complete sort of picture of the full range of what OD&D became, right up to the point when TSR released first edition or advanced D&D. So it's sort of the whole spread of 1974 all the way through 1978. So that's the one that Frog God is supporting. I left White Box really to be a fan generated source of support because I really felt like and I wasn't getting too corporate, but I was the things that I was writing were sort of dominating things just because I was the official author of it, and that was not what I wanted to see. I really wanted to see more of a community. So that's the summary. That's the summary on the 3 different versions of it.
That's really interesting to me that white box was requested because we see these kind of like sweeping, I guess, dichotomies between what people think of as pure D&D and not pure D&D, and that line is different for everybody. But for some people, it's like when they added thieves, they ruined D&D. Like it goes that far back.
Yeah, I'm not of that mindset though.
It definitely changes the game a bit when you add thieves.
Yeah, right. And we were talking about the difference between a retroclone and a simulacrum game, which I think is sort of different for everybody. But I was just saying that the clones were generally intended to just replicate the original rules via the the SRD that was out there, allowing you to do it legally, and that the authors really were trying to avoid adding in their own house rules and things like that. Whereas in the simulacrum games, people were they were usually working in a few different rules, but their objective was still to duplicate the feel of a game. So, for example, Castles and Crusades, I think very accurately duplicates the type of play that most people actually did with advanced D&D back in the day, because people did tend to play a more stripped down version, especially the people who had started with the Holmes Basics set, for example. And then what happened was you just added in the character classes, but the rules often stayed pretty much the way you'd been doing them. So
when I was playing AD&D as a kid, we didn't use almost half the rules.
I'm in an AD&D game now, and like the one rule that I never have known anyone to ever use it is the like modifiers to attack rolls for specific weapons versus specific armor
and speed factors.
And speed factors. Yeah, I've never used those when playing AD&D, and I've never played with anyone else who, I'm young, so like people who grew up playing first edition, none of them ever used those rules either.
Are you guys using segments?
No.
Yeah. I didn't use those as a kid. I've played in a few AD&D games that use segments since then, and it's weird.
I've done like D10 initiative, and then your initiative roll, I guess, would be your segment, but
yeah, well, actually you use a D6. Let me totally nerd out here. I mean, you use a D6 to find out which segment the opponents are going to go in, and then the spells. Some of the spells will carry you beyond segment number 6 out of a 10-segment round.
Oh, that's not how I've used segments in the past. Interesting.
And there's also there's also the discussion about whether the magic user has to announce what spells they're casting at the top of the round, and there's actually ambiguity in the DMG about that.
Yeah, that the segments really kind of muck about with the magic user a bit. It's a lot easier to cast on your go than to have to plan ahead and know how many segments your spell's going to take and what could change between now and then.
Yeah, it's definitely an additional tactical element that's involved in it.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, but also sometimes frustrating, especially when you're used to loosey-goosey classic BX type of game that I play.
Yeah, it's not for me. I definitely like the older. I guess not older. I guess technically not older, but I like the more simplified, just side initiative D6 versus D6.
Well, and that's purely an AD&D thing, right? Segments never existed in OD&D. Is that correct?
Not once you hit the Eldritch Wizardry supplement, where Rob Kuntz did write an initiative system that was divided into segments. It was done differently than it was in AD&D. It's not a method that I'm really fond of, because I think it actually works out to be clunkier than the AD&D system, and so probably what they did was to streamline that for AD&D. They obviously made lots of changes, and so in that system it did bring in the issue of what level spell you were casting, and so there's a lot that's in common. But yeah, there was technically one, although it came in relatively late OD&D. The first one, like I said during the technical difficulties, is that Gary was a businessman, and so he tried to link and cross-sell the two products by telling people to use the initiative system from Chainmail. But the problem is that since Chainmail is a mass combat system, it had divisions between different types of troops. It had a split initiative for missile fire, and it just doesn't work very, very well in the small unit. If you think of AD&D as being small unit combat, it just doesn't work particularly well in that kind of tactical format.
I actually wanted to pick your brain about that, because I know Swords and Wizardry Complete is, the 3 little brown books and then all the other supplements. But what was your thought process for what you actually included from those other supplements? Because there are things that, are missing Like specifically in supplement 2, there's a table. I hate this table. There's a table for attack roll modifiers against different heights, and like depending on what weapon you're using, and like that's not in Swords and Wizardry Complete. So I wanted to like pick your brain about when you were creating the game, how did you weight things to add from supplements, and then what things to leave out altogether?
Well, we're actually into the legal context on that. The one area where I'll claim to be an actual innovator in this stuff is that I was the person who came up with the fact that you could get into the old systems via the parts of them that were duplicated in the system reference document for 3rd edition. And so and also keeping in mind that this is back when people still remembered the highly litigious TSR of the 90s. And so there was a lot of concern about people getting sued over doing the retroclone approach. In fact, when we wrote Osric back in 2005, 2006, I mean, we were relatively sure that we were going to be sued by Wizards of the Coast. And we even did get a message from them asking us to take it down for 24 hours. And Stuart Marshall, well, he said no, which I thought was a pretty ballsy move on his part. And we went back and forth, and the person that we were talking to really didn't. He was still thinking in terms of the D20 license rather than the OGL. And I'm even into the jargon, so sorry about that. But the main rubric that I used for cutting things out was because there was nothing in the SRD that would support that in terms of protection from violating copyright. And so, for example, there is an illusionist class in the strategic review, but it's nothing like the illusionist class that ended up in the SRD. Well, I mean, there is no illusionist class, but it didn't end up with enough in common with the SRD that we felt like we wouldn't be violating copyright law if we took that stuff out of the strategic review and put it into Swords and Wizardry. Similarly, a height table is not something that's really reflected in the SRD.
That's really interesting. I never knew, because I know the OGL is what allowed people to take these old rules and publish them, because you can't copyright math is like the watered down explanation for it. But I didn't know it had to be, you had to take things that were specifically in the SRD, and obviously you're looking at how those aspects of the game played in the 70s,
right?
Versus the 2000s D20 model. That's really interesting that's the criteria that you had to go off of.
Right, because it's not just the issue of the fact that rules can't be copyrighted, because what can be copyrighted is the presentation of rules. And so there are some different, it uses different tabular formats than the ones that were used in the original books in a lot of cases, because you can copyright format. And so the protective shield that's provided by the OGL, it goes through the SRD. The OGL is just something that unlocks the open game content that's in the SRD. You still have to be relying on the SRD or somebody else's open game content before you can duplicate that presentation. So, and that's probably a lot deeper into it than most people are interested in hearing about. But that's the way it works, and so that's the reason that there are some things, most notably the illusionists, that are simply missing from OD&D. I mean, Swords and Wizardry.
It's a good point that it probably is deeper than what most people would care about. But like, I think for a future episode, I think we should have some like retroclone authors talk about that process. That is super interesting to me. Just as someone who likes game books and likes game rules, the mindset for how you have to like skirt around legally, the copyright. That's so cool. That's really interesting.
We'd like to take a brief moment to explain we're not giving anybody any legal advice.
Yeah.
You're on your own.
I'm not
listeners.
a lawyer.
And I am a lawyer, which makes it even more important that I say that I'm not giving anybody legal advice. I can discuss in general what the rules are, but I can't tailor anything to anyone's specific situation. So, and bar associations are very much like medieval guilds, and when I retired from doing law, I quit paying them the $200 a year or whatever it is to practice law, which means that I can actually do less in the way of practicing law than any random individual on the street, because I have not paid my dues to the bar association and yet have a law degree, and they frown on not paying.
Why have we waited 10 years to have you on the show? Like, I never knew that about you. That's fascinating.
Well, so we talked a little bit about segments being in OD&D and the illusionist and all these other things. I find it genuinely surprising once I started digging back into all these additions how close OD&D is to AD&D once you've added all the supplemental material. They're almost
you have to me, I don't know if it's on the show, but in our own private conversations, referred to Swords and Wizardry Complete as AD&D Light, or OD&D with supplements as AD&D Light.
That's not wrong. I mean, it was brought up to really the same scope that AD&D covered. It's just that most people don't see it in its totality, partly because it was a whole series of books and magazine articles, and it was all in different places. But when you do put it all together, like in Swords and Wizardry Complete, you realize that it was about the same size. The AD&D books were in some cases a reimagining. For example, the 3 alignment system from OD&D was changed into the 9-point alignment system, and again, like the initiative system that Rob had come up with was streamlined to work more quickly. But you're exactly right. I mean, it had reached the same sort of outer limits that Advanced D&D did.
I have one question more about Swords and Wizardry, and that is single saving throw.
Man, I was going to bring up single saves as well. I was thinking about it.
And once again, what you're looking at there is a legal issue, because if you recall, the saving throw system that was in place in the SRD at that time was the 3 saving throw model. What was it? Dex, Constitution, and
Fort, Reflex, and Will.
Right, Fort, Reflex, and Will. That's what it was. And so at that point, we didn't have anything that could really be legally used to model the original D&D system, which is similar to the one that's used in AD&D. Which has all of the different categories, and those categories are fairly quirky if you think about it. And so, they really matched up to the relatively limited number of spells that came out in the white box, and they put those into kind of categories of turning to stone, so on. And so, not having something that we could rely on for the legal protection, what we did was, and also the fact that you can copyright formats. What we did was we turned that into a single saving throw, but the numbers are altered by bonuses for the different classes. And that allows you to approximate the numbers that you would get by using those original tables. And so it is technically a single saving throw, but because of those various class bonuses to it, it is not really a single saving throw. So if that makes any sense.
Right, and because it's modified based off what you might be saving against, like dwarves getting a bonus versus poison. But are you aware of the TSR product that had single saving throw in it?
No.
Yeah, there is a First Quest was the name of it. That is the one that came with the CD. That simplified AD&D system had single saving throw.
And there's no one has ever mentioned that, and it's not something that I stumbled across back in the day.
Yeah, it's because nobody actually played that.
Okay, fair enough. So it's
they
like
threw the CD in and listened to it and said, "That's cool."
So it's the precursor to 4th edition.
I'm trying to think if I've ever seen this product. I don't think I've ever even seen this product.
It's one that had, like, you would play part of the adventure, and then you would play a track of a CD, and it would like radio play out that part of the adventure for you.
That was the that was the 90s, all right.
Yeah, TSR was trying all sorts of stuff, VHS tapes and CDs, and
I was 6 years old. I was in first grade.
Thanks for that.
I just heard a bunch of our listeners log off the Oh man. Well, okay, let's go ahead and jump into the Kickstarter itself now. And
Okay.
this new release for Swords and Wizardry.
Yeah.
I like that it's a box set. I'm a big fan of box sets because I know previously there have been like Swords and Wizardry white box sets. I think Brave Halfling published them.
Yeah, Brave Halfling did it. I licensed it to them, and they did a very, very good white box version. And those are actually, it's kind of funny because they're like $200 on eBay right now.
Yeah, it's I missed my chance to get it, and much like the reprint of the original edition that Wizards did, it is now way too expensive for me to justify buying. Is it going to be like an A5 format or like a digest size format?
It's digest size format.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's going to be 4 books. Originally, the plan was to do saddle stitching, which is stapling. To anyone who's not familiar with it, it's because I like those because they will lay flat, and as long as you've got a book to put them in, they won't try and climb right out of your bookcase every time that you pull out some other book. But we're going to have to go with perfect bound because largely because the player book, in order to have the good sort of sense making division between the books so that they're at their most usable, the player book ends up being too long to be stapled at the middle, because obviously there's a certain size at which stuff just doesn't work when you're stapling.
Yeah.
So they're going to be perfect bound books. In other words, just regular soft cover type books in there. And also with the stretch goals, because it took off unbelievably. I mean, we expected that the whole Kickstarter would probably raise $45,000, and we broke that we broke over 40 in the first 24 hours. It was while I was doing a Discord chat that night that we crossed over the line of where we thought the entire Kickstarter would do over the entire length of it. So I mean, it was unbelievable response. It's slowed down a little bit now. We're through the early bird discounts that we had on there, and so it has thank gosh slowed down a little bit, because I would like put in the graphic for the stretch goal, then I would write the update for the stretch goal, I would answer 2 messages on Facebook, I would check where we were, and I'd be like, okay, let's start this cycle again, let me put up the new stretch goal. So it was a wild day yesterday.
Yeah, Kickstarters are always very, very stressful. My best friend has done 2 successfully funded Kickstarters for video games that he's created, and I remember the first one he did. He was stressed out about it.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it's because even people who are being totally nice are posing lots and lots of questions, and half of them are questions that you had not thought of when you did stuff ahead of time, and you're all of a sudden having to stop and think in the middle of this unbelievable level of activity, and it's hard to think when you're stressed out and when you've got lots of people asking questions and putting up graphics and all of that stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's a running a Kickstarter is it's quite an experience when you're doing it. And fortunately, we had several people who were helping to monitor when we had somebody asking a question in the comments, and sharing the marketing side of it, of sharing it on Facebook, and people are tweeting, and that sort of thing. So it is helpful to have multiple people working on that, but it was quite something.
So what was the impetus to go back, or not go back, I guess, but go to a box set from a single volume?
Well, I mean, the first thing is that we were running out of the books, and so we had the choice between doing a reprint of a book that was really designed, back in 2010, I think it was, and so it was entirely black and white, and so rather than reprint that, we thought, what's cool, because we don't do different editions. There's, it's a clone of an original game, and so anything that you try and add to it is fake. Basically, we're gonna add optional stuff in some supplements. So we are going to start doing some supplements to it, but really the core element of it has pretty much by definition got to stay the same. So we don't do new editions, and we've wanted to do a box set for ages and ages, but box sets are really expensive and really high risk. You've got to bring in enough people to do it. They're very labor intensive, unless you have somebody else putting them together, which can absolutely kill you, because if you have a really huge response to it, just putting stuff into boxes takes lots and lots of time when you're trying to fulfill a Kickstarter. So box sets have a lot of challenges to them that don't exist with books. I mean, with a book, you're just working with a printer, nobody else. But if you're putting in dice, and things like that, and you're assembling it yourself, you're relying on all of those suppliers to get you the right stuff at the right time, put it together. And so we wanted to do one. We didn't quite have the guts to do it until this one, and I think it's come together really, really well, I think. But certainly a box set is fraught with peril. So. Oh, but we figured it would be cool to come out with a box box set. Yeah,
yeah, because
the early tagline for the show was, "If it comes in a box, we'll talk about it."
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean that's that's bottom line, really, is boxes are cool just like dice are cool.
Yes, and I've got an ever growing collection of both. Just different box set Kickstarters that come out. I'm just like, yeah, all right. Well,
yeah. Well, based on your earlier comment, I suspect I've got dice that are older than you are.
Probably, yeah.
I have dice that are older than I am too.
That's true. He does.
I'm not as young as Crispy, but I'm not that old.
The New World Order of young OSR people.
Well, but the thing is that my original. You hear everybody talk about those crappy plastic dice that came with the original basic set. And it's even, talking about people getting specific, it's even a point of pride that you got the dice rather than the little chits that they did when they ran out of dice for a while. But they become just round after a while because the plastic wears away as they're rolled. But I don't have mine. If I did, I would probably have some that were older than Carl as well. But I think since I lost that set of dice, I think I'm restricted to having dice older than Crispy.
I did want to ask about, because there have been two, like, quote unquote printings of Swords and Wizardry complete. I mean, there's probably been more printings, but there's the blue cover and the black cover.
Yep. And then there was a greenish cover even before that.
Really?
And then we've got another one that's sort of a black cover that we did after that one. And those, we don't have any more of those. So the books that we're running out of are actually the prior printing, which I can tell you the reason for that. It is because Bill Webb is not good at keeping track of inventory. And we had boxes of those that had been stored in Paizo's warehouse because they were the distributor. They were doing the distribution stuff for us. And so when we ended that, they sent back this box that had an enormous number of the Aero Lotus covers in it that we didn't know that we'd had. So we would have been doing this box set even earlier if we'd never found those.
Oh, wow. I wanted to ask about the production for these books. I know they're going to be perfect bound. Are they going to have are they a hard or soft cover?
Soft cover.
Soft cover. And then what about talking about you guys don't do editions, but the older books are, like you said, they're all black and white. Are you going to be updating that? Are you guys going to go like full WotC glossy paper, full color illustrations?
No, we are going to do it in color. Most of the art that we are doing is it's all going to be new art unless we're like at the last minute and we suddenly need a picture of a goblin and we have to grab something, from the older ones.
Mhm.
But it's all going to be new art. It's going to obviously be new layout because we're shifting to a digest size, which has a different aspect ratio than letter size paper. And the art that we're getting in is going to be black and white, but it's going to involve sort of splashes of color here and there. I don't know if you've seen Red and Pleasant Land. There are a few other artists that did things this way, where like you'd have somebody where the whole picture was black and white, but like the cape that somebody's
Yeah,
got.
this
And
show
that's not an exact thing because it was done with more than one color, and what we're looking at is really just a combination of two colors showing up in them. Because the thing is that the aesthetically, a lot of this black and white art is sort of decried as being just nostalgia by the old 40s and 50-year-old ponytail, great big beard kind of gamers. And the thing is, it's not that. There really is a different aesthetic to black and white art, and it
Yes.
creates a different feel when you're looking at a book. I mean, the thing about the black and white book is that you feel like you're sort of reading something in the campaign, almost as if you're one of the people who's in the world reading it, except for there are these rules things in there. But reading a monster manual is a lot like reading a medieval bestiary, the black and white ones, and so
Mhm.
it puts you into it in a very different way than color. Color. In color, you're directly viewing what a world looks like, and so it's like you are a whole step closer to being in that world when you're looking at something that's got color illustrations, and you're a step back when you're looking at the black and white art. And so there really is a different aesthetic to it, and it's one that we want to maintain. But for example, one of the things that people assume now when they look at black and white art is that you did it so that it would be cheaper, which is not what we're doing. We're doing it because we really like the effect that the black and white art has. And so having these two colors is something that will first of all eliminate the idea that this is being done just because it's cheap, because it's clearly it is color art that's in there. We've gone to the expense of the additional color, and I think that also spins something new into the pure black and white. It has a lot of punch to it when you've got that sort of combination of things going on.
Let me say, as an almost 32-year-old child, I definitely do agree with you. There is just a distinct feel aesthetically of older D&D manuals, like the monster manual. If you look at like the little doodle of like the Rust monster, that's a completely different look and feel than this super highly polished digital art version that perfectly like encapsulates the pop cultural zeitgeist view of what a Rust monster is. And like I don't think it's just for nostalgia, because I can't have nostalgia for these things. I wasn't alive when they were new. They were 20 years old by the time I was born. 10 years old, I guess, by the time I was born. So yeah, like there's no nostalgia there. I like the look and feel of the art of these older books. So I just wanted to agree with you there.
Part of it's just the amount of information your brain is receiving. If it's black and white, you're expected to fill in some information on your own, and that in and of itself has a charming aspect. It's the difference between reading a book and watching a movie. Filling in those images, deciding what colors you would perceive if you were actually seeing this in real life. Part of that has a merit.
Yeah.
And that kind of throws in an interesting thing about DMing skills, which I know is way off the track of what we're trying to talk about here. But there are a lot of beginning DMs who are, and it's because they're watching Critical Role and they're, reading long box text that's written in the more modern books, but they feel like they have to that when they're at the game table, they have to describe things in considerable detail. And I think it's a lot more powerful to describe things in pretty general terms. Reason being,
Yes.
that the people who are hearing that are going to fill it in, just like we were talking about with the black and white art. They're going to fill it in with their own minds, which means that there's a lot less chance to sort of trip over the curb in terms of them visualizing things. They're going to get a much cooler more powerful visual image from the less specific descriptions than they will from the very specific descriptions.
I have a story about this. In my last BX game, they were in the sewers of like the city they're in, and the city was like the sewers were built adjacent to like the Archwizard's laboratory. And some of that magic had seeped in, and there was actually an underground botanical garden just in the middle of these sewers with like in like an antechamber. And I just described, I was just like, it's a botanical garden, because in my mind I have a very specific image of what a botanical garden is. And I feel like if I say botanical garden to you guys, you will have a similar but yet wholly unique idea of what a botanical garden pertains to. I had a player he's a very nice guy, but I do think he wants a little more detail than I wanted to give, where he was like trying to like ask such specific details. How high are the shrubs? What kind of trees? Are they fruit bearing? Blah, blah, blah. It's sort of like when you start adding in those like very specific details, it detracts from everyone else's imagining.
So I've always said that I wish we could hook wires up to our brains while we're playing a D&D game and record those images that everyone thinks of in their mind when they're playing Theater of the Mind. And then after the fact, go back and watch everybody's videos to see like what they saw at that time and how it compares to what you saw at that time. So I just think that would be cool to see what everybody else was imagining at the same time.
Yeah.
One of the fun things we did when I was running the online campaigns with
Swords of Jordoba.
Swords of Jordoba, yeah. We had a couple of things where people talked about them afterwards, and we realized that every one of the players sees themselves as the hero of the adventure. And so when they are retold, you can get some very different stories about what actually happened in the adventure, which was that was a lot of fun to do.
Yeah. One of my favorite things to do after games way back in the day was we would always end up at like a Denny's or an In-N-Out Burger and just stay there till 3 a.m. just talking about the game that we had just played. And just recount to each other how we viewed specific moments, and just like getting another person's perspective for how they imagined a scene, and just being like, oh, that's so cool. I thought of it like this. And then like just piggybacking off each other to build the puzzle of, I guess, what had actually happened, quote unquote. That was always like one of my favorite things to do.
Maybe that's why I want brain recordings, because I can't actually remember what happens.
I think brain recordings, I don't know, like 10, 15 years, I think we'll be there. I guess we should get back to this Kickstarter, I guess.
Sorry, that was me. I derailed.
No, it's okay. Like, you're like, yeah, but I was running these online games, and I was like,
geez, Matt.
Like, I'm telling you, I'm
an
Matt.
inveterate, derailer. I'm really kind of anarchistic in conversations. They go places that no one expects, including myself.
That's all right. Do you want to talk a little bit about your tiers for pledging, or the different stretch goals that you guys have lined up?
Sure, we can do that. The a lot of the tiers are now gone. Because there's a collector box in it that looks an awful lot like the old wood grain box, and then we've got a much more modern one where it's not a sticker on the box; it's actually printed on the box. So there's one that's very retro and one that's more modern. But the collector's one is limited to the 500 that we order, and then there's also a printer overrun that we'll have. So there'll probably be another 25 copies or so.
There are currently 92 at the time of this recording left out of that 500.
Yep. Well, we only actually sold 450 on the Kickstarter because we got to have some left over if some are damaged or the copies that go to the people in the company and so forth. So that's what's left out of 450. But yeah, they went very, very fast, and they'll obviously all be gone by the end of the Kickstarter. But that also that necessitated some odd things in the tiers, because, for example, if you're offering them in one tier, you have to reserve the ones that are going into that one tier. You can't just shift around how many are going to be available in the tiers later on, because on Kickstarter, once one person has pledged to a tier, it's locked in, which is to stop people. You pay for something with a credit card and then they change what it is you're getting. So there are several tiers that are gone, and we also did an early bird tier for the first 24 hours of it, and of course those are gone as well. So now we are pretty much at the regular retail boxes. There are many fewer tiers surviving in that. We have but we've kept it down for simplicity's sake, which is important not only to Kickstarter backers, but when you start filling up shipping boxes, you want to have the fewer things that you might or might not have to put into that box, the fewer errors that you're going to have. And so we've got the wood grain box, we've got the regular box, and we've got a set of extras. And the extras pack contains a lot more new stuff, because the box sets really are just the same text in a new layout and with new art. But that one contains it does contain monsters which will be repetitive of the Monstrosities book, but that's been out of print for quite a while now and won't ever get reprinted, because it was done back in a time when paper was at a really low price, and it would be too expensive to reprint now. So there's going to be a selection of stuff from Monstrosities in a supplement. It'll be the first supplement, like I was talking about with the house rules and so on, and it's called More Monsters. And I spelled it when I was really excited about the idea of this when we were planning it. And so when I wrote the message about what I wanted to call it, I spelled More, MOAR, all caps.
Yes,
that actually carried forward. That is the name of it now. Is the More is MOAR, and
I love that.
Thank you. And then there's that. There's a DM screen. DM screen is not 8.5 inches tall. It's one of the lower ones, which I've come to like over the years, because you can see what's going on at the table a lot more easily than you can. So we went with one, and it's very long as well, because it is nice to have more space on the inside than a 3-panel, 8.5 inch wide.
I've never understood how people can operate with 3-panel screens. It baffles me. I don't understand it. Like, I've always had 4 or 5-panel screens, and then since 2011 I've almost used exclusively landscape screens.
Well, back in the day we had 3-panel screens, and we liked
I know. That's all you guys had,
Yep. Anyway, so it's a DM screen. It's a monster book, and it is a module called Baron's Gambit that I've got blocked out in terms of what it's going to do, and I've got the map and so on and so forth. So all that's left is sort of filling in the outline with the words, and I know what all happens in it. I was in a chat room, and I was like, okay, anybody want spoilers? And there's a big chorus of no, don't want spoilers, so I won't give spoilers out.
Oh man, I want spoilers. I personally love spoilers.
You want spoilers on it?
I want spoilers. Yeah.
Okay. You're in a small town called Cat's Cradle. You're summoned, and here I'm just reading the start of the adventure, because I usually write introductions and backgrounds and starts before I really get into the thing. So you're in the small town of Cat's Cradle, and you're summoned before the lord of the town, who offers you employment in his service for a small task. He's been planning to develop a small village near the border of his domain with a small castle, a ferry across the river, and a road that's going to connect this one to a town that is in the territory of the next baron over. But he sent out the surveyors for it, and then he did the survey, and then he sent out a bunch of the construction supplies along with 3 men-at-arms. And the men-at-arms, suddenly all 3 of them are killed and it's in some strange fashion, and the supplies were destroyed or looted. And so the Baron wants to know if any of the villagers are responsible, and if not, who is. And the players are assigned to basically, handle it, find out what was going on, fix everything, and he's going to be there in 3 weeks for the start of the construction. And so that's sort of the beginning that you get, but then it turns into something that's very different from what they are going to assume from that, because you're going to assume that this is just bandits sort of attacking the situation, and that you've got your standard hunt them down and kill them kind of thing. But it turns out, and you really want to hear the spoilers, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So here's what actually is happening. There's an old ruined temple there, which the players don't hear about in the initial briefing from a distance away, and they've only got a little bit of information. So there's a ruined temple out there, and so what the temple has underneath it is it's got its cellar level, and then underneath it it's got an area where there's a river runs through it, and they had built a mill wheel there, and they created this really, really awesome statuary there. And the way it was done was with a couple of minor earth elementals that had been gifted to the temple at some point in the past. And so what's happened is that this scholar found out about it. He got himself a scroll that had a control minor elemental sort of spell on it, and it's got command words in the middle of it, and it's got this nice little border of sort of shifting magical text. And this guy's not a magic user, so he goes in and he tries to cast his spell on the thing, and what he didn't realize was that it's not just something you can read aloud. The magical script around it is actually the activating portion of the thing, but he didn't use a read magic spell. So the characters at some point are going to come across this dead guy, and he's going to have this scroll, and hopefully they figure out that this is magical script that they're going to need to cast a spell to read. Otherwise they're in trouble. And so one of the villagers knew that the guy was there, and the players are going there, and they're going to sort of do some sort of investigation of the villagers, because I'm specifically saying in the thing that he wants to find out if any of the villagers are responsible. So this guy's hiding something, that he knew that this guy was here, and he's actually got the papers that this person brought with him, which is where, except for the scroll, which is down in the dungeon, there are going to be some clues about what all was going on in there, and I haven't really figured out all of those clues yet. But so what they're facing, so they go and they look at the dead people, right? Why didn't it kill anybody before that? Well, because nobody's walking around dressed in metal up until the guards arrive. And so they go in there with a whole bunch of shovels and picks and things like that, and they're all wearing metal, and it attracts the elemental, which during one of the things they're going to realize when they go into the dungeon is there's no metal left in the place. There are places that are gouged out of the stone, but all of the doors are just lying around, with the latches removed and things like that, which may give them a clue that there's something here that's different from bandits. And so that's going to be the general combination of the clues and things that are in there. And so that's the background of the thing. And like I said, I haven't written down all the details yet, but there's some cool stuff, because there's two ways of getting in. One of them's through a shaft that had a winch that pulled stuff up from this secret dock. And then the other thing is it's designed, part of their reward is that they get a little plot of land. And so if they work it right and they're able to control the elementals, then they can not only build their own house with the elementals building it really quickly, but the Baron is going to buy these now controlled, assuming that they managed it, these controlled elementals, and that will allow him to develop his little castle bridge setup very, very quickly. And so what I want to do is have this module and then have a little source book for that'll come out. The page restriction is going to keep it from being in this thing, but a little tiny source book that's simply a setting of here's what this village looks like only 5 months later as a result of this very rapid construction and the Baron bringing in all of these workers and trying to set up a trading post, to where now you've got an actual player base in this little tiny town that's been built up incredibly quickly as a result of the Barons trying to develop that area, which is why it's called Baron's Gambit. Mm-hmm. So there you have it. There's the sort of beginning outline set of spoilers on it.
So I was
I
gonna
can't remember.
go ahead and ask. I feel like we kind of skipped over it a little bit, but can you tell us about the different books that come in the box?
Oh yeah.
One of them is going to be the player book, and that's going to include the character class creation and how to play, which is a fairly short section in Swords and Wizardry, how to play. And then that's one book, and then we're going to have the spell books for the various classes in a second book to make it easier for people to refer to spells, because that the character class stuff and the how to play is really pretty much not used once things get started, but the spells are, and so that'll give them something that's got all the information that they're using at the time concentrated in one place.
I like the idea of separating out the spells under their own book. I think that's always a very handy resource to have.
Yeah, I mean that's the thinking behind it. We always have big wars about whether we're going to list the spells by level or list them alphabetically, and I always go for alphabetical because I'm a DM, so I have to look up. I like to look up stuff without having to remember what level it is. So then, and then there's the obligatory Book of Monsters. Obviously, that all fits conceptually into one book, and then the last one is the obligatory Referees book, which is also one of the larger sections in there because OD&D had the aerial combat and the siege combat and that kind of stuff.
Boat combat.
Yep, exactly. So there's those. So that's the division of the 4 books, and I mean I think we've got them. It is going to cause some difference in the lengths of the book, but I think we've got them conceptually divided in a way that's going to be the most useful for people, so that they will only, except for the DM. Who's got both his monster book and his referee book. I think it's going to lead to people only really having to have one book in front of them, and that it will also be easier for a new player to assimilate things in bite-sized chunks, a small book at a time. I think Swords and Wizardry has always been pretty accessible to new players, but there are always ways to people like to get their information in small chunks and not to be intimidated by books with lots and lots of pages in them. And if you hand somebody something that's clearly pretty much a booklet, then there's going to be more willingness to dig into that and be willing to read it. So it's directed toward that as well.
I want to ask something about the campaign, because I know this is essentially to replenish the stock of Swords and Wizardry books. With the campaign, is it going to be a 1-to-1 backer to production rate? So right now you guys have 715 backers. Is that the amount of books you're going to produce? Is that going to be roughly equal? Or are you using this to print a backstock as well to be able to sell in the future?
We're using it to produce a backstock.
Okay.
So this will be, so for a while, I mean, the PDF of the complete rulebook is free to anybody. And so it will continue to be available for people who want to grab a copy of what the entire book is. Although it won't be printed there, but for the foreseeable future, when you're buying Swords and Wizardry Complete, that'll be a box. And then when we run out of the boxes, we'll either make more boxes or we'll go to a book. We'll try and do something different, because otherwise you're really just selling people the same thing over and over again, which kind of sucks. And so, yeah, we're definitely going to hold on to an inventory afterwards.
Matt, aside from the Kickstarter, is there anything else you'd like to plug?
Not really. I mean, I'm a terrible salesperson, and I don't try and one of the things, going back to the early OSR, I think a lot of the people tell you is, I don't market or sugarcoat anything. It's like when people, even in this one, people have asked, well, what's new in the content of these? And I'm like, nothing. It's the same words, yeah, we're doing relayout, and that's really important to a lot of people, and it's digest size, which is important to a lot of people, but I'll flat out say, look, right now, if what you're looking for is game content, your best bang for the buck is probably buy yourself one of the existing books while we've still got them. But if you like a box set and you like the new art, and you want the dice that are in there, and the physical trappings that are involved in a box set, then by all means, grab the box set, because people, once again, people love boxes. But if you're strictly looking at the rules, you can pay, what is it, $30 for the for the rule book, and it's got an awesome Aero Lotus cover on it, and that's probably still your best content for the dollar kind of a thing with it. So,
I mean, not to take sales away from you and Bill, but like it's free. You just print out Kinko's.
Right. No, exactly. And that's, and that's becoming really, really important actually nowadays, because the shipping costs on things are really, I had a exchange of messages, because we're probably going to put a digital tier into this, because I was talking with Rafael Beltrame, who's a friend of mine from Brazil, who does he's really into the OSR community in Brazil, which there's a thriving OSR.
Yeah, there is.
Brazil. And he was saying, wow, this box set is excellent. We're trying to, put some money together to get one shipped, but, we're trying to find the alternatives to it. And it was kind of like, in the States, of course, you forget about what's the effect of all this extra expense that's being shipped out for the people who are getting it. And having stuff shipped from the U.S. is more and more becoming a wealthy person's game in a lot of these countries. And, it's 60, 70 pounds to ship something to the UK. And, so what a lot of people are doing, and we've always allowed this from Frog God, is that if you get a PDF, you can print it for your own purposes. So they're going to, I think you have to use print shops in Brazil, because I think you have to print it in Brazil. But there might be Lulu outlets and stuff like that there, but they're using the print-on-demand services, uploading the PDF, getting themselves back a bound book, and that way you get around the enormous shipping costs. So we want to encourage the game. It's about much, much more than profit. If it were about profit, we wouldn't be doing RPG publishing in the first place. We'd be doing something else. But we're about making the game available to people. That's why our PDF of the game is free, and it's why we have no problem with people doing the printout. In a country where they got digital delivery to do it. We've always been in favor of that.
And I mean, you guys are still supporting the game. You're still selling copies, even at offering it at no cost. And aside from printing, people want to play this game. Obviously, since we've been recording, you guys have gotten $400 more.
How much did we pull in?
You're at $52,624.
We were bringing in $1,000 an hour during the very beginning of the thing. Like I said, it was wild.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. There's been a little bit of slowdown, but I mean, there's still a month to go. So, and there will be a link in the show notes to the Kickstarter, of course.
No,
and we'll also share.
No, there won't.
There will in this instance.
Into the show notes. Nothing
into the show notes. That's where we put all the stuff that we don't want to be bothered.
Go to somebody else's Facebook page and find the link.
That's right.
That's the best we can do, guys. That's the best we can do.
It's on Liz Stewart's timeline.
Yeah, but we'll also share it on. Actually, here, let me do that now. I'm going to share this, if we haven't already, to our Facebook page. Elizabeth. All right.
We like to keep everything professional around here.
The sad part is that this is not a joke. This is actually what I'm doing. All right. Well, I think that'll wrap it up for this episode. Again, there's a month left on this Kickstarter. If you're interested, if you're like me and you love box sets and you love black and white art and landscape DM screens, these are all the things I want. And booklets that are specifically just spells that you can hand out to your players, because they never know what their spells do, even though this is the third gosh darn segment in a row, Carl, where you've forgotten how to cast Magic Missile. So those are always handy tools. And I think we're going to call it a night there. Matt, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show. I'm sorry.
Of course, it's about damn time.
All the technical difficulties that I caused while I was here.
It's all right. We forgive it. I think that'll be it for this episode.
Peace out, Cub Scouts.
The Save or Die podcast is a production of Wild Games Production, and it's produced for entertainment purposes only. The music used in the intro and outro is by Tripod and used with permission. Be sure to visit the Save or Die crew at saveordie.info for more information. If you'd like to support this podcast, please go to patreon.com/WGP.